In Rimworld, your goal is to build up an entire colony, survive, and explore as long as you can before eventually returning to space and beating the game. Well, what if I told you I wanted to do exactly that, but as a solo colonist, completely useless at everything. Meet your main protagonist, 𝐏𝐽. He has 0 skills in everything, but paired with extreme passion in all his skills. Equipped with the iron-willed, super immune, jogger, and quick sleeper traits, giving him a chance to become one of the most OP characters in the entire game. I should also mention that I'll be playing this on the hardest difficulty, but my plan was to restrict myself to only using a single colonist throughout this entire video, with the exception of controlled mechanoids. This was going to be a very difficult challenge, but nonetheless, we began with our protagonist 𝐏𝐽. So, I found 𝐏𝐽 crash landing in a drop pod from some kind of emergency ejection from orbit. He looked kinda dazed, naked, and confused. Just a humble little guy all alone in a strange new land. No weapons, no food, no shelter. It's safe to say I needed a game plan to keep 𝐏𝐽 alive, and my goals were not only for him to survive out here all by himself, but thrive and become proficient in almost every skill and find a way to return back to space. First order of business was getting some wood. I had 𝐏𝐽 chop down a few trees, and just like that, he earned his first level in plants. Then we got to building a little cubby into the mountainside. This would serve as our temporary shelter for now until we could expand and build up a proper base with defenses. For food, there wasn't much a choice early on. For now, I would have 𝐏𝐽 go out and harvest berries to live off. It wasn't great, but it would keep him going for now. However, we would need to sort out our food situation as soon as possible. I'd be planning to set up a small rice farm, and luckily, there were a few high fertility patches near the base. Okay, so it's not a lot, but you know what? It will do. It's actually going to be a lot more helpful than it looks. This will actually allow us to grow up rice a lot quicker than just planting it traditionally, so this is good. So first thing the next morning, I had 𝐏𝐽 plant the fields. Unfortunately, it's gonna take some time before we can get our first harvest, so until then, we'd have to keep foraging for berries to keep him well fed. And as for hunting, well, that's not exactly an option. I mean, I could give it a try at smaller animals, but I'm not confident in 𝐏𝐽's combat skills, considering, well, he was awful at it. Not to mention, but he had no medicine stockpiled. One bad animal fight, it would be all over for little old 𝐏𝐽. That being said, I figured I may as well have 𝐏𝐽 craft a makeshift club out of some wood he had harvested earlier. At least now he had a weapon that he could defend himself with, which would be better than piecing up a squirrel with his bare fists in my opinion. So with the club ready, I would send 𝐏𝐽 out to deal with his first foe, a rat. Luckily, 𝐏𝐽 was able to successfully take out the rat before it would do too much damage, and this would also grant 𝐏𝐽 his first level in melee. He took a few scratches, but won the fight, and after I patched him up using a bit of herbal medicine that we managed to scrounge up, feeling confident, I pushed him a little further. This time, I had him hunt a bird, butcher it, and finally, we cooked our first simple meal. Our first simple meal, finally. I should actually probably make him a table and chair, because in Rimworld, for some reason, eating without a table is like committing war crimes. It's just you just shouldn't do it. Now, my plan was to get 𝐏𝐽 to start working on a research bench. However, he needed some steel in order to build it. So I would send 𝐏𝐽 to mine a steel deposit that was exposed in the mountainside, but then I noticed that there was a small structure that he could just disassemble right next to it. Oh wait, there's still walls right here. You know, this is actually perfect because now I don't need to actually mine the steel. Like I just disassemble these and I'll have exactly how much I need. Now, with the steel and wood collected, I had him build a simple research bench. Finally, we could soon begin focusing on some research projects. But first, I also planned a new room within the base that could become a dedicated research room with another one slotted to become a food cellar later on. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, 𝐏𝐽 would get food poisoning. Probably from the rat meat, but who really knows at this point? I took my eyes off him for like 2 seconds and he just got it. No, he got food poisoning. Oh shit, bro. That's actually really bad. Knew that was gonna happen. Of all things, food poisoning is what's gonna kill us. I will say this will become a constant theme for 𝐏𝐽, at least until we can get a nutrient paste system set up. Nonetheless, we continued on and would stockpile some wood to continue building up the base. However, it seems that a rabid mad squirrel would begin wandering into our region. So, feeling confident, I would send 𝐏𝐽 out with his wooden club and handle this minor threat. Then, while trying to butcher and cook up our new prize, he would just throw up every couple seconds from food poisoning. Don't worry, little old 𝐏𝐽. It'll all get better someday. Later that same day, we got a surprise signal from a mechanoid distress transmission. Something about a grav engine in orbit. Mechanoid signal. You've detected a signal from a mechanoid ship in orbit. The ship is malfunctioned and slowly losing altitude. By falsely responding to the signal, you can make the ship crash land nearby, letting you salvage valuable grav tech, and you get a grav tech engine, which is what we need for making our spaceship. Sure enough, not long after, a grav engine crash landed just west of our base. So, feeling a little curious, I sent 𝐏𝐽 over there to inspect the engine. Amongst the remnants of a crashed mechanoid platform, a still intact grav engine hums with energy. You can build a grav ship substructure around the engine to create a new grav ship. The engine pushes against gravity, levitating the ship and allowing long distance travel. Okay, cool. Maybe with this grav engine, we could could possibly return to orbit and explore this strange world. But there was a lot of time and work we needed to do before then. So to be safe, I would also have 𝐏𝐸 drag the wreckage back home so no raiders would steal it from us. Also that same night, I had him chopping down some more trees so this way we could stockpile up on wood. And good news, the rice we had planted earlier was finally ready for harvest. 𝐏𝐸 did botch a few plants of course, but it was better than eating berries. At least now he had a small stockpile of food we could use to cook up a few simple meals. And for the first time, we weren't starving. I would also make a note to try getting a nutrient paste dispenser set up, which would secure us a way to process food without having to cook every meal. And of course, 𝐏𝐸 would be getting food poisoning again. This was pretty bad because it would make him sick and cause him to become malnourished. While he was recovering, a group of shaman merchants visited the base, but I didn't bother trading with them. And right as he recovered from food poisoning, well, he got it again. You just had food poisoning, you got it again? Oh my god, bro, stop getting food poisoning. It was starting to feel cursed. Since he was stuck inside sick, I figured now would be a good time to begin researching. I started with researching bows. The reason for this was so that he could at least defend himself from a distance. But since he's got 0 levels in intellect, it would take him a long time before he can finish researching this. And by now, we had just surpassed our first 10 days. His skills were coming along with a few points in some areas like plants, construction, and intellect. The progress is slow, but this is what you expect when you only have a single colonist, let alone someone who isn't really the best at anything, but that's part of the fun. Right now, he isn't much, but one day, I believe 𝐏𝐸 will become really OP later on. So now that 𝐏𝐸 wasn't vomiting every 5 steps, I thought it would be a good time to expand our food operation. With that in mind, I had him double the size of our rice farm. He would also have a nice sizable harvest from his temporary farm, but of course, 𝐏𝐸 botched half of it. However, he was starting to get the hang of it as his plant skill would continue to increase. Then we started to work on building up some more tilled land for expanding his growing space. I had also planted a few extra spaces for a few other different plants. Rice for food, along with cotton and a few other crops for drug production. Not to mention, but he was just shy 2 levels before he could grow heal root for medicine, but it wouldn't be long before he could eventually get there. However, we would need to put this on pause, because suddenly another rabid animal would appear in the area, but this time it was only a turkey. Luckily, we had a simple spike trap prepared right out front of his base, which would handle the turkey for us. In my opinion, free food was delivered straight to our door, and I wouldn't hesitate to have him rebuild that spike trap, which was a good idea because not long later, some tox folk from the Waster gang wanted to try at us. And I won't lie, I was a little worried for 𝐏𝐸 considering the raiders' combat skills. Hold on, let's take a look at their melee. Oh shit, that's that's not very good. Guys, we might be cooked. I'm really hoping that this trap is enough. All right, 𝐏𝐸, stand right there. Come on, 𝐏𝐸. Show them how it's done. Yes! Yes! We survived. Thankfully, 𝐏𝐸 was able to handle this way better than I had anticipated he would, but I guess we have a lot more to thank to the spike trap than anything else. Speaking of which, this got me thinking that we could really use a defensive structure around the base area. Shortly after this attack, 𝐏𝐸 would kindly add his defeated raider to his food supplies, before then building a stonecutter's bench. The plan would be to work at this bench by cutting some nearby granite into blocks, which we would use to build some kind of defensive wall around our farm and base area. However, before we can finish constructing the wall, we had a fella named Armadillo fall from the skies. Luckily, he wasn't related to any neighboring factions that would become upset from us turning Armadillo into our next meal. That's right, if you hadn't caught on yet, 𝐏𝐸 is also a cannibal. Not to mention, but now 𝐏𝐸 had some clothes. Now he has a shirt he can wear. Okay, this is gonna be pretty brutal. But he's gonna get melee skills. Oh, some food and some clothing. Also, up to this point, he still hadn't fully researched anything yet. He was still working on the same bow research project, which at this point, I decided I wouldn't focus on much researching, at least until we had our nutrient paste system set up or a good supplies of food stocked up. But no time for this now because a Wookiee showed up in the area wanting to do harm. However, it wasn't much a problem because we had just finished aligning some traps along our outer wall. Poor Doc didn't stand a chance. Then later, I got a quest for paid force weather test from the Orange Empire to install some blind fog for the next 14 days, which in my opinion, I quickly accepted that for a chunk of silver. And with the blind fog outside, it would make a good opportunity to allow 𝐏𝐸 to focus on expanding his living quarters and mining a bit into the mountainside. Plus, some merchants came by to visit, which we would spend our money on buying some wood and herbal medicine. It probably wasn't the best use of our silver, but it would save us time to focus on other things. And look, now he has a comfy little straw flooring in his home. At least it would be slightly better than walking around on rubble from carving into the mountain. And I will say, despite how small the progress seems, it was nothing short of monumental detrimental for little old 𝐏𝐽. As a single person, all alone, he was starting to mold into a decent colonist. Still pretty far from his true potential, but little accolades like this felt bigger than it seemed. And while he replenished his farmland with more crops in this dense fog, I looked not backward but forward for our star protagonist. So we began mining deeper into the nearby rock formations looking for steel. Between the stone cutting, construction, and eventual nutrient paste system, we needed a way to get more metal than what we had. Also, I would have him dig into a compact machine deposit right outside his home. This would net us some components would eventually be needed for constructing power sources like wind turbines, solar, and many other things. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, came the bad news. 𝐏𝐽 got organ decay in his left kidney, of all things, honestly.
Organ decay? What? 𝐏𝐽's developed a flesh-eating infection known as organ decay in his left kidney. The infected organ will slowly lose function over the next 36 days before dying completely. If you wanted 𝐏𝐽 to stay healthy, install a replacement left kidney. This could be bionic or a natural organ taken from a donor. How? How am I meant to do? I can't do medical stuff on him. How am I meant to save him here?
Luckily, it wasn't a major issue for now, but we had to be cautious because this could become life-threatening, or at least until we can find him a replacement. Speaking of which, one huge issue with 𝐏𝐽 being all alone is he wouldn't have anyone to do any medical operations on him in case of a dire situation. So eventually, we would need to find another way around this, but that's a future me problem. In other news, the skinwalkers were taking form of a horse just outside the walls of my compound.
Yep, there he is. Look at him freaking the hell out. That's a skinwalker right there if I ever seen one.
And of course, another toxfolk named 𝐏𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐞𝐿 showed up just in time for the party. And I will save you the anticipation because unfortunately, he didn't get that far before 𝐏𝐽 would just finish him off from a distance. Anyways, I began mapping out some more expansions for power, a wind turbine, and even a wall lamp. Finally some light in this place. Later, we would also construct an electric cooler and then moved around the food cellar and research lab. Then, from the heavens, a random dude named 𝐏𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐞 crash landed near the base. Now, under normal circumstances, I might have offered help, but I had a decaying kidney to deal with and a very limited organ donor pool. So naturally, I figured this was my big shot. I sent 𝐏𝐽 in for the operation and, well, he botched it.
Oh, it killed him. Did he at least get the organ? Surgery Oh, you dumb bastard. You had one job. We literally had a fresh body delivered to us from the heavens and you it up.
In other news, we had a full harvest. Finally, now we had a good supply of herbal medicine and rice, which we would add to our food cellar. Also, later on, I would decide to switch out the bow research project for batteries, because, well, at this point, we would probably just loot a weapon off a raider before we'd end up finished researching it. Also, at some point, we were gifted some cows, which I ended up trading away for some components and a mining XP book. In my opinion, it was a good deal. The cows were gonna die anyways. I made sure 𝐏𝐽 would also stock up on plenty of metal because now the plan was to focus on working towards that nutrient paste system. And by now, we had finally reached day 50 since 𝐏𝐽 set out on this strange land, and my plans were to expand the base area, adding new rooms, proper labs, maybe even a workshop zone. His little hovel was honestly becoming a little cramped. Anyways, before we could start expanding, I wanted to let him focus on researching batteries, and day after day, this was his life for now. He would wake up in the morning, grab himself a meal and a smoke before spending the day behind his desk figuring out how to make a battery, with the occasional horseshoe throw or fun at the archery target. And eventually, by the time he had reached level 6 in intellect, we had now unlocked batteries, which I would follow up with planning to research solar panels. But first, I would have him construct his first battery after doing some minor expansions into the mountainside.
Oh man, this is perfect. Finally, we have a battery coming in now. We're actually gonna start having power in here, which is crazy. Making so much progress.
I had 𝐏𝐽 mine out a couple new rooms and begin plotting layout ideas for a real blueprint. We would extend parts of his living quarters along with his food cellar and later his research lab. This is also when we would begin prepping the cellar expansion, since the nutrient paste system was growing in size and the original spot was getting a little tight. But for right now, we had another raid on our hands. A single fella named Chook with a pistol, but he was so kind to just donate it to me. Now, 𝐏𝐽 had himself his very first gun, which we would then use to attack an ominous looking mechanoid cluster on the northern half of the map. Attacking it would cause it to explode and even dropping some kind of mechanoid transponder.
Okay, so now the mech transponder is in the fire. We're just going to set this as a home for right now. Crypt transponder.
After analyzing the mechanoid transponder, a ship crash landed with a scary looking cipher mech. However, before we can come up with a plan to handle the cipher, it decided to just send itself through our spike traps. Then, with a few missed shots by 𝐏𝐽, eventually he would land a couple clean shots, taking down the cipher.
All right, come on 𝐏𝐽. Show him how it's done. Show him how it's done. Hell yeah, nice shit.
With that dealt with, I would have him head up to the crash site and investigate the remains of an old deceased mechanator. This would drop us something called a mech link, which would allow us to control our very own mechanoids. Of course, this would have a very extensive list of things we would need to do before we can have ourselves a mech army of our own, but at least soon enough, 𝐏𝐸 would have some help around here.
Let's just disassemble the shuttle real quickly. Oh, look at that. We have our little mech, a lifter. Oh, I guess it's randomized? I thought you would usually just get a constructoid, but I guess we got a lifter. All right, it's better than nothing.
The lifter was already proving useful, hauling resources, food, and all sorts of things back to base. It freed up so much time for 𝐏𝐸 to focus on the more higher level tasks. But then a new pawn crash landed near the base, which in my eyes was more organs for harvesting.
Don't f this up, 𝐏𝐸. Don't f this up now. Nice. Okay, we have a kidney.
Up until this point, I had forgotten that 𝐏𝐸 still had organ decay in his left kidney, but without another pawn or person to do the surgery on 𝐏𝐸, I'm afraid the only option was to maybe see if we could find someone who can temporarily be forced to do a quick surgery. Unfortunately, so far, no one had decent medical skills to do this, so for now, we would just have to wait and see. With the lifter handling hauling duties, I shifted 𝐏𝐸's focus to research and base upgrades, and the nutrient paste system was finally constructed. No more cooking, no more food poisoning. Finally.
All right, and finally, we now have the ability to withdraw nutrient paste meals. And this will last us a while. Like, look, we have 75 meals backed up in storage, almost 75. So we'll just coast for a while now.
Now with us passing day 80 and after finishing the nutrient paste system, the plan for right now was to focus on replenishing our farmland before stocking up on some more wood. Then we would be able to shift our focus to just grinding out some research projects. However, we would need to put a pause on that because some raiders were approaching our base. Thankfully, this was no hassle at all, and they kindly donated us some shiny new toys. Okay, so now back to researching, and eventually 𝐏𝐸 would finish researching solar panels and then followed up by basic mech tech. We would also plan to researching a few more things, but I had him take a break to finally add some flooring into his living space. Also, we were 90 days in, and I'll be honest, things were starting to look kinda decent. The base wasn't completely disgusting anymore. We had a proper farm, a nutrient paste system, defenses, and for a good while, I just had 𝐏𝐸 focus on researching and catching up on stuff, even fully flooring in the lab and building a cozy armchair for him to sit on while working at the research bench. But not long later, I would have him begin working on the early plans of expansion for his outer wall. I would plan to have him extend the trap funnel, adding some more spike traps so we could prepare for larger raids that would eventually come. Perfect timing too, because some more toxfolk showed up and really stepped all over all our newly built traps. Anyways, we had a new captive named Smasher, which, if you hadn't already guessed it, more organs for selling. Then, as if the gods heard my prayers, a hostile paralyzed pawn crash landed near the base, which you already know what 𝐏𝐸 did. By day 100, 𝐏𝐸 had just unlocked modern furniture. This came with a few neat additions, but the main thing we were after was the filing cabinets. The plan was to build a few near the research bench, which would give us a bonus to our painfully slow research speed. However, we currently had a shortage of steel, so I would have to put a pin in this. And not to mention, but I also had plans to build some new mech stations for gestating and creating new mechanoids. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to need to see to our steel problem. So with that being said, I had 𝐏𝐸 deconstruct some mechanoid parts and ship chunks scattered around the place. This gave us just enough steel to make the mech gestator and soon this thing called a subcore encoder, which will also be used for making more mechs. But still, we were running critically low on metal. So I had 𝐏𝐸 mine deeper into the mountain looking for any steel veins we might have missed. I also remembered that we got a meteorite of compact machinery like 40 days ago. So fashionably late, I attempted to dig all that up. And after collecting all the components and hauling it back to base, suddenly an electrical fire would explode inside our food cellar and in our workshop, which thankfully 𝐏𝐸 was quick enough to take care of. Anyways, back to researching for now. And soon enough, we would finally finish researching smithing.
Smithing, finally, after 115 days, we finally have it.
Afterward, I had 𝐏𝐸 return to mining into the mountainside, and while digging, we uncovered an entirely new area of the map that had been hidden from us this entire time.
Oh, okay. So we have another area here on this map. Yeah, so there it is. It's just been hidden from me this entire time.
A whole nother world hidden behind our little base in the mountain. Also, I did quickly realize that this could be used as another zone for raids to attack us from. So I had 𝐏𝐸 build some additional doors to seal off the tunnel he had accidentally made in the process. And I decided to dig out a secondary path. This would let raiders loop around and walk straight into our trap tunnel, rather than busting into the base through the side. Soon enough, the detour path was finally finished, and I reinforced it with a few traps and deadfall checkpoints just in case. No matter which side of the map the enemy spawned on, they'd all end up funneling falling into the same kill zone. Koi was finally starting to master this whole survive and fortify thing, and with a working mech lab, reliable power, stocked medicine, and enough steel to keep things moving, we were ready to take the next big step. Later on, some traveling merchants paid us a visit, and I used some of our saved up organs to trade for a pair of sheep, mostly because I wanted to finally level up Koi's animal skill, and also ranching sounded kinda cool. Plus, we could get some extra money from selling their wool. But good news, because with our newly found land, we also found some exposed steel on the mountainside. With this, I would begin the construction of a subcore, which would later go towards gestating a constructoid.
Alright, our first mech is being gestated. It will take about 2 days, and then we'll have a constructoid.
Finally, we now had our first additional mechanoid, but I will say we were beginning to have some power problems with our new machines, so I added some solar panels to support our battery bank. Then gestation for a mill tour would begin a couple days after, and just in time too. We were getting raided by a small tribal squad, but these guys decided to start their visit by picking a fight with a wild insect hive that's been chilling on the map since day one, which they took out the insects for me. Thanks guys. Then they turned around and came straight for my lifter bot.
No, my lifter. He's out here all by himself. Inside, little buddy.
Luckily, our trap tunnel softened them up, and Koi, along with his freshly spawned milter, cleaned up the rest of them.
This is for killing my little lifter. How dare you?
And after repairing the milter, I set Koi to focus on researching for now, since we had most things under control. And soon enough, Koi had finished researching machining. The plan was to work our way up to microelectronics, which would unlock the comms console. This would be needed later on for advancing into more mech tech, along with also summoning our first mech boss. And speaking of mechs, we now had a little aggro hand which can handle plant cutting and growing for me. Perfect, because for the most part, all the chores around the base were now being handled by our small mech army. So after some time of locking Koi behind the research bench, we finally finished microelectronics. I would also queue up gunsmithing, blowback operations, and gun turrets as our next research priorities. The idea was to get some auto turrets online soon, reinforce the front lines, and build a killbox to handle larger raids that will soon be coming. We had just finished researching gunsmithing, unlocking the ability to finally build our own ranged weapons, a much needed upgrade for Koi's defenses, but in my opinion, we'll probably end up just buying a gun or looting it off a corpse, but I guess we'll see. Anyways, before I can enjoy the moment, an infestation decided to spawn right next to that steel deposit I had my eyes on, so instead I'd ignore this for now and just remain at the research bench and deal with this a bit later. Speaking of which, we now had gun turrets unlocked. Meanwhile, I did try to have Koi sneak over to the same steel deposit near the hive, hoping I could mine it without attracting any attention, and it worked until a tribal raid showed up.
Man, what's the chances a damn raid would start the second I step outside? These damn tribals.
Some of the raiders even wandered toward the infestation, and I thought I might have drawn aggro away, but they didn't. Instead, Koi had to fall back, and I ended up gunning a few of them down on the way back to my base. Eventually, the insects also started moving towards our base. Unfortunately, there was no more avoiding it. We now had to clear out the hive. It was a long and bloody fight, but with spike traps and our milter, Koi was able to lure them into his courtyard using his other mechs to draw the attention of the bugs, while he would wipe them out from a distance using his shotgun.
Oh boy. Yeah, this is a problem. Keep getting him, Koi. You're wrecking the base. That's not allowed. That's illegal. There we go. Hell yeah. All right, go in there and finish these guys off.
With that dealt with, I would send Koi over to take care of their hive, so this way they couldn't spawn any more bugs. Then, like clockwork, the Empire dropped into the middle of a mech cluster I had been ignoring since the defoliator ship crash. They honestly did me a huge favor by triggering the mechs and handling the job for me. After the fight was over, I moved in, dismantled the defoliator ship, and walked away without ever having to fight a single mechanoid. With the infestation behind us and some space finally opening up in the research tree, I set my sights on the next milestone, mechanoid advancement. So that meant I needed to build a comms console to summon the Diabolus, which is the first mech boss that will unlock a higher tier of mech tech for us. With that being said, I started by having Koi expand the research room, carving out an extra space into the mountainside for future benches and research equipment. And not long later, Koi and his constructoid finished up the comms console, which means now we could summon our first mech boss.
Oh, that's a dubious. Summon Diabolus available. A mechanoid can use the comms console to summon a dangerous and hostile Diabolus mechanoid. Be prepared, Diabolus mechanoids are extremely powerful. If you defeat the Diabolus, it will drop the following items. Signal chip. Okay.
However, before we did that, I decided to rework the entire power grid. So I would remove the old wind turbine and add a few new solar panels while also relocating the others to a more optimized space for the coming workshop expansion. Not to mention, but I would then begin expanding the workshop, which would add some more space for all sorts of things like storage, workbenches, and mech equipment. However, just like before, it seems like my biggest problems was still steel. So I would begin sending Koi back into the mountain and search for some more steel deposits. Although it seems that we have some bigger problems right now, as some tox folk decided to drop pod raid right on top of little old Koi's bedroom. I hate drop pod raids, but it's fine because I had enough time to evacuate Koi from his enclosed space and gear up his milter to fight. Luckily, the raiders seem to be a bit more focused on stealing our insect jelly than actually putting up a fight, so Koi and his milter were able to just gun them down without any issues.
Fuck them up, Koi. Fuck them up. They're distracted. They're being little loot whores. They're greedy loot goblins. Fuck them up, Koi. Hell yeah. Fuck them up. Good shit, Koi. Good fucking shit. God, that was like actually the best outcome for a drop pod raid I've ever had in this game.
And after cleaning up the mess that they left in my house, a trade caravan of bulk goods came around with some really decent trades I've been needing for a while. I would sell most of our textiles like wools and human leather that had been taking up a bunch of storage space, along with buying some steel, components, and a book for recreational use. All that cannibalism is finally paying off. Not long later, Randy decided to throw some tribespeople at me. However, some visitors did do half the work for me and shot up most of the tribespeople, and then my traps would pretty much handle the rest of them for me. I had also captured one of the downed tribespeople for some organ harvesting, but of course, Koi would botch most of the surgery. This guy, he only had one job. Well, with a few minor base tweaks like moving around a few furniture and finally closing in Koi's bedroom, something about adding a little bit of homely charm in a game that's constantly trying to kill you really just makes me a certain kind of happy. Anyways, after working on the workshop and storage space for some time, I decided I should focus on building up a bit of extra defenses. So Koi would construct a couple auto turrets out front of his base, along with some cover in case anything got past his traps. Perfect, because I think it's time we now focus on the first mech boss. So I would send Koi to man the comms console and signal the first Diabolus threat.
Directed your mech band signal, an ultra heavy mech from Irix Mech Hive will arrive soon. Be prepared.
And it wouldn't take long before it would crash land in our area. So with this being said, I made Koi get all his mech friends ready for the attack. Well, almost all his friends. I may have forgotten that his lifter was just chilling asleep outside his walls, and he kinda got obliterated by the boss's laser cannon. No big deal, because Koi would make sure to avenge this little guy.
My animals are all gonna probably die, but you know what? It is what it is. Up, he's almost dead. Got him. Hell yeah. Good shit, Koi.
Finally, I had defeated the first mech boss. Now I could take its signal chip and unlock the next tier of mech tech in the research tree, standard mech tech.
Signal chip studied, standard mech tech unlocked. Hell yeah.
This was quite a huge moment for little old Koi. After starting from nothing, let alone being useless in pretty much everything, this was a big day for him. Congrats, Koi. Give yourself a pat on the back. And maybe get back to work on finding some more steel, why don't you? Now that we could get to the next tier of mech tech, we were gonna need a lot of steel. And I mean, eventually, I would be able to get ourselves our own tunneler, which honestly is pretty dang cool.
And the second I can get some tunnelers, man, time would start increasing because mining is such a pain.
Well, unfortunately, we have a lot of work before then. Also, I guess I hadn't mentioned it, but I'm sure you're wondering what I must have been doing with all the toxic waste buildup from all our mechs. Well, actually, Koi's just been dumping it off in some random corner of the map. I will have a better solution for this later, but for now, a little bit of pollution wouldn't hurt. Anyways, I would send him back into the mountain to begin strip mining for steel. But of course, just as we got started, an infestation would break out just near Koi's courtyard. Okay, well, I guess I'll take the time to take care of some bugs. Luckily, it wasn't much of a hassle, and he made short work of the nasty little bugs. I hate infestations. Well, back to the mines we go. And good timing, because Koi finally had struck a steel deposit, and I would make sure he would prioritize getting all of the ore. Also, while Koi had been busy in the mines, his constructoid had begun working on a little expansion beneath his base. I wanted to use this area for more power expansions, but then suddenly a random wild pig lady wandered into my courtyard and helped itself to a baby lamb.
What the fuck? Yo, what the hell? What are you doing to my sheep? What the? Yo, this wild fucking pig woman just killed a baby lamb and starting to eat the corpse. What the hell? Koi, get the guns. Fuck her up. Fuck up, bop, 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 boo, boo.
Okay, so with that little intruder taken care of, I would get back to working around the base. So we would be closing in on day 200 of this challenge. To kick things off, I spent a couple days cleaning the house, breaking down junk, recycling old gear, and destroying scraps I didn't need anymore. It freed up some storage space, but more importantly, I noticed a power shortage started to creep in. The more bots and machines I added, the more strain it put on the grid. But unfortunately, the solution was the same as always: steel. We need more steel. So once again, mining became top priority. While digging around the deeper mountain sections, I finally struck another steel deposit. And just in time too, because I wanted to begin gestating some additional mill tours to beef up our defenses. Oh, and I decided to try my hand at making a standard subcore, which required me to put Koi into the machine to craft it. However, I wasn't exactly sure what this would do to him.
Wait, what is this doing to him? Is this gonna hurt him?
Okay, so it turns out it just gives him scanning sickness for a while. Nothing too serious, but going forward, I need to capture some raiders to use as subcore donors instead of Koi. Speaking of which, also not long after this, some tribespeople came around looking to attack my base, but like usual, my traps took care of them. Thankfully, I was able to capture at least one of them, and I would even take the time to expand the prison a bit for future captures. With defenses solid and the power grid holding, well, barely, I returned to researching, and just as day 200 rolled in, we finally constructed the high-tech research bench.
Day 200, we're here. Holy shit.
It was a massive upgrade. With this, we would soon be able to construct a multi-analyzer and unlock advanced weapons and all sorts of good tech. So by now, Koi had been progressing his skills quite far from his starting points. His combat skills were coming along, and his construction, medical, intellect, mining, and more were pretty high levels by now. He was actually starting to become a really OP colonist. Also, later I got a quest to build a massive stone monument in exchange for some mid rewards, although a chunk of plat steel and an artistic skill trainer. I didn't care about the skill trainer, but the plat steel? Yeah, I'll take that. I was gonna start needing a bunch of plat steel anyways for some late game crafting. Also, now that I mention it, not that I have any use for the artistic skill, but at least this skill trainer would be helpful to get him some levels in this. So I accepted, and construction began. At some point, I also wanted to expand our power a bit. If you hadn't noticed, we have this little steam geyser right next to the base, so building a geothermic power over this would be something I'd like to do soon. But anyways, while Koi and his constructoid would work at the monument for our quest, we had some traveling merchants visit. And like before, we would trade some of our organs and leathers for more steel. And after what felt like ages, we wrapped up the monument just in time and claimed the plat steel, along with giving Koi the artistic skill trainer.
There we go. Artist level 11. Is that what? Holy shit.
Then, literally out of nowhere, we would be visited by a mechanoid cluster.
Mechanoid cluster. Oh, on my base? Huh? I've never had a mechanoid cluster spawn that close. Are you serious?
So I drafted Koi and his military squad for a full send into the courtyard.
Oh my god. Right off the bat. Dude, this is fucked. Actually, how am I meant to fight this with a shotgun and 3 milters? Damn, W milters, bro. Alright, I thought I was actually done for there.
I've never seen a mech cluster drop this close to my base before, but luckily Koi was okay. And by day 223, we finally finished researching geothermal power. I immediately began reworking the power grid, and Koi slapped down our very first geothermal generator. But of course, as soon as I finished it, an infestation broke out in Koi's bedroom.
Oh, never mind, we're getting an infestation in my bedroom? Why? Game bugs. Nasty bugs.
So I cleared the bugs, fixed the walls, and along with later doing some minor base upgrades and painting some of the floors. Also, I had just remembered that I could use our comms console to call one of the orbital traders. So Koi called the bulk goods trader and bought a fat haul of steel, flat steel, and components. With the new steel, I began gestating our first tunneler mech. While it cooked up, I had Koi and his bots tear down the monument we built earlier. It was taking up space, and its purpose had been served. Meanwhile, I tossed one of our prisoners into the subcore scanner for the next big mech build. Koi also knocked out a few other research projects, and we had also built a band node tower. This would allow him to increase his total bandwidth in order to control more mechs. And on day 238, our beautiful tunneler finished gestating and immediately got put to work. Finally, I should no longer need to send Koi strip mining for steel. Things were really coming along. But before we could admire our new tunneler mech, the Toxfolk decided to drop pod directly into Koi's dining room.
Here we go again.
Okay, well, that could have gone worse, but thankfully no major injuries. And great, now 𝐏𝐸's home is a mess. But of course, just when we thought we could get a break, a psychic drone ship crashed down into the edge of the map. But before I could handle that, I had to clean up my home, because 𝐏𝐸 was not very happy at this moment. Plus, I could really use some mortars to help deal with these type of threats. And I think it's about time we also upgraded some of 𝐏𝐸's gear. With that being said, a combat supplier would begin orbiting over 𝐏𝐸's region, so we got in contact with them on our comms console. Then I made the usual trade with organs in exchange for an assault rifle, a reinforced barrel, and a few mortar shells. Once ready, I had 𝐏𝐸 build our first mortar and would have him begin firing at the crashed psychic drone ship, eventually destroying it. This would anger some of the mechs that were around it, but they ran through our traps and died before they could reach us. So as you already know, I've been dumping toxic waste packs that come from our mechs off into some random corner of the map, but it looks like the pollution was starting to spread a bit. Plus, I've also been storing some of them in my food cellar this whole time, which is probably not a good idea. So I assigned 𝐏𝐸 a small project of building a proper cooler for stockpiling them until maybe one day I could just shoot them over to our tribal friends on some other part of the map. However, of course, an infestation would rudely spawn itself into my future cooler area, so I had 𝐏𝐸 send his minotaurs to take them out along with their hive the next day. Okay, so another infestation dealt with. Man, I really hate these little bugs. Anyways, we are now on day 250, and our power's been holding strong lately. But I decided to expand our solar grid anyways, and slapped on a couple more panels. With mechs, research, and base expansion all chugging at once, we were gonna need it. And luckily, my tunneler mech came in clutch, because it found not 1, but 4 steel deposits buried in the mountain behind our base. That officially solved our steel shortage, at least for now. Since we were finally stocked up on resources, I gave 𝐏𝐸 a break from hauling, building, and organ snatching, and put him back on the research grind. The next big goal would be to build a multi-analyzer, which we would really need to unlock the next tier of late game tech. But while 𝐏𝐸 was busy reading his books, a tribal raid came crashing through with breaching hammers, so for once our traps weren't as effective. But it was rather unlucky for those travels because they would just pour right out into our courtyard in front of all our turrets and minotaurs.
Easy peasy. Hell yeah, work minotaurs, work everyone.
After that raid was handled, we captured a few other raiders and would process them into, well, materials. And around the same time, our brand new pikeman mech finished gestating.
Ooh, we got a pikeman, hell yeah.
So with all that handled, 𝐏𝐸 got back to researching, and by day 268, we had finally finished researching the multi-analyzer. Soon after, I had him construct the multi-analyzer in the lab, which would boost future research speeds going forward. A pretty big milestone for a little old 𝐏𝐸. I will say this space was starting to get a little cramped, especially with all the new mech stations and such, so I ordered a full expansion of the storage wing to give us more breathing room. I also started planning the outer defensive wall redesign, mainly so I could begin laying out space for a future spaceship construction zone. We're not quite there yet, but it's good to get ourselves prepared for it. And just as I was admiring our fresh research lab and new wall layout, a massive mechanoid cluster dropped in, complete with some sort of EMP device. Apparently, it shuts down power in the whole map if we left it unchecked. So I knew I had to act fast before things spiraled. With that being said, I had 𝐏𝐸 fire a mortar to aggro the mechs and funnel them into our trap hallway.
Got it. Oh my god, okay. Jesus.
Luckily, 𝐏𝐸 didn't take a scratch, though a few of our mechs did get a bit banged up, which we could easily repair, so no problem there. And after a quick cleanup, I destroyed the MP device before it could wipe out our power. Another perfect defense for 𝐏𝐸. Good job, bud. So after the last mech cluster and the sheer amount of damage control I had to deal with, I realized something very important. My current defenses aren't gonna cut it anymore, so I gave 𝐏𝐸 the order. It was time to rebuild the killbox from the ground up. So I spent a while getting 𝐏𝐸 and all his mechs to build a whole new extension to the wall and some sort of maze for the enemies to path into. And by day 290, we had finished a considerable amount of research projects, and now we would be setting focus on researching fabrication. It just needed a few additions to make it functional, but the way it works is by creating a large maze for the enemies to path through, and I would have the option to turn this into an oven of sorts. Basically, all I need to do is light a fire in here and let the heat build up enough to give all the raiders extreme heat stroke. Some crazy stuff I learned from Adam vs Everything on YouTube, so credit to him for this design. From this point on, I would focus on upping my security and defenses because soon I wanted to begin building my spaceship and even summoning the next mech boss. And by day 300, I had done exactly that. I would have 𝐏𝐸 summon the War Queen.
War Queen is coming. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but next boss is on its way. Oh, the War Queen has arrived. An ultra mech heavy Ironics, mech hive has come to eradicate you along with escorts. It's got War Queen, the Pikemans, and Ciphers. Okay. Here they come. Am I missing a Miltor? Oh, you. Get over there. Fuck her up. Fuck her up. Fuck up the War Queen. Yes, we did it. Well, finish off the last of them.
Now with the War Queen defeated, I was able to analyze his power focus chip, which had unlocked the 𝐏𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐞𝐝 research projects.
Studying the power focus chip, KOI has acquired the insight needed for the research project's 𝐏𝐼mech. Researchers can now use research benches to begin researching how to actually use the technology. Nice. So now we've just unlocked this, which now if we get it, we can make all sorts of things. We'll start researching things like that very soon. We just need to clean up what's going on here.
We had just passed day 300, and for the current moments, I would have KOI do a bit of work around the base to clean up from boss fights, repairing any damaged walls or traps. I had also decided to make a control panel which would add another work group to KOI's mech slots, and ready to push for more upgrades towards KOI's mech gear, I decided to have him summon the first mech boss again so that we could get another signal chip. These things were used in some of the mech upgrades and crafting, but before I could get around to do this, the game decided I should be visited by a swarm of rabid guinea pigs. I love this game.
Oh, what the f***? Manhunter pack, guinea pigs. Oh, look at them all.
Well, anyways, after we'd handled this, I got back to setting up for the mech boss again. Speaking of which, with our little mech army taking on the first mech boss once again, it was hardly a hassle for KOI.
Alright, PR Milton.
Also, this was perfect too because we would be able to recycle down the mechs into plat steel, which we needed more of, especially for this thing called the grav anchor, which would allow me to launch into space without destroying my own base here. It costs 300 plat steel, grav panels, and advanced components, so every trade caravan that came by, I would make sure to buy as much plat steel that I could afford. Then, soon enough, I had expanded our lab and then would build the grav anchor. Luckily, it had been a while since any raids had tried to come at KOI's base. However, not long later, a mechanoid cluster landed literally right out front the walls on top of a couple visitors. Sorry guys, that's really unfortunate. So I put KOI on the mortar and began shooting at the mech cluster from a safe distance, and would also fight the mechs as they came in through our kill box. Then again, literally right after handling this first mech cluster, another one would land in the area. Of course, I handled this one the same way by shooting it with a mortar. This mech cluster definitely had a lot more mechs to kill, but thanks to my kill box, it was pretty easy to kill them off. In other news, I had also finally finished researching fabrication, followed up with later finishing 𝐏𝐼mech research, and then built a fabrication bench. For the most part, I had made KOI focus on a handful of things. While I had the spaceship being built, I would continue expanding production and mech tech in the base. We expanded our lab and added some more band nodes, along with a new tier of subcore production called a subcore rip scanner. And by the time the spaceship was mostly done and almost ready for takeoff, a raid began by some toxfolk. However, thanks to my kill box, which also has an oven capability, I was able to light some wood on fire to set the indoor temperature to over a whopping 1000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, let's go, it's working. Oh yeah, so this little kill box thing I've made here is actually like working perfectly how I wanted it to. It's just cooking them inside this room here like an oven. It's just too hot for them to get through in time, so they've all just given up and now they're leaving. Hell yeah, I'm happy about that. I don't have to like risk KOI's life to fight them.
Any and all the raiders would die from heat stroke before they could even reach our turrets. To some, this may be a little cheesy, but in my opinion, I don't care. I like some cheese every once in a while. I would also have KOI begin working on making a paramedic mech. That's kind of hard to say, a paramedic mech. However, it turns out a hive subcore is needed for gestating this fella, and in order to make one of these, I would need to kill one of our pawns in order to create the subcore, which is where 𝐼mech comes in, one of our prisoners we've had for quite a while. So yeah, they kindly offered to donate their brain for this operation. Thanks, 𝐼mech. But not long later from this, the nasty pigfolk decided to drop pod raid right on top of our base, but in a very narrow hallway. So it turns out they kind of killed themselves a bit with their grenades, but the others were swiftly dealt with by 𝐏𝐸 and his mech army. They did leave some damages, which I just left up to our mechs to repair for us over time. Speaking of which, over some time, I had also captured a few other prisoners, which would just be meant for getting more subcores. Then for now, I just had 𝐏𝐸 begin crafting a vac suit and a mech commander helmet, which should help him survive in space, of course. I mean, if we're planning to head to space, we would be needing this for sure. I had also built a fabricator mech, which would do the crafting so 𝐏𝐸 didn't have to. Now, let me tell you, this little guy is honestly incredible. He was just powering through so many things that I've been needing 𝐏𝐸 to do for so long. This addition was honestly super helpful. We had also built a chem fuel processor and started stockpiling up on some rocket fuel. At this point, I was feeling pretty confident. We had 4 Miltors, 2 pikemen, 1 Cypher, 𝐏𝐸 in full gear, so I decided it was finally time to summon the Apocryton, the final mech boss. The entire squad lined up at the killbox and we would face it head on.
I'll kill the damn thing. Yes! We did it again. We did it. Kill the Aprocraton. Analyze nano chip. Hell yeah. Lost a couple guys, but that's okay. We can fix them up.
We had finally done it. 𝐏𝐸 had defeated the very last mech boss. With that, we got something called a nano structuring chip, which unlocked the ultra mech tech in our research tree. It's crazy to think how far lonely little old 𝐏𝐸 came since the very beginning of his journey. He had nothing, let alone he was practically useless in every skill. But now he's come really far, building this fortress and taking on all mech bosses and even building an army of mechs he could command himself. Not to mention, but all his skills were almost fully maxed out by now. And on day 399, the tribals had made one last desperate push, trying to breach my base directly and avoiding our fancy new oven, but 𝐏𝐸 and his mech army made quick and easy work of them. Now, I believe it's finally time we sent 𝐏𝐸 to fulfill his mission on here. There is still something he needs to do, as the fight is not over yet. And so, with all preparations made, 𝐏𝐸 loaded into the rockets, packed fuel, food, and all his mech friends, and everything else he would need to survive out there in space. Then, with everything in order, for the first time ever, he set off, leaving his fortress behind. But maybe not forever.